might as well start this. I'll call the meeting to order. With the pledge of allegiance. Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Somebody want to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So we do have a couple changes to the agenda. I'm just gonna point out really quick. There's one addition to the consent agenda, and that's to confirm the resignation of William Pearson's jailer dispatcher effective the end of his shift, November 5th, 2022. And then the other change is initiating a competitive search for a social worker has been pulled from the agenda, so we're gonna,
Number 5.
yeah,
Number 5 was bold.
correct.
Both. What's the date on the retirement?
Took out 5 and we're gonna add it.
30th?
He resigned as of November 5th, 2022.
November 5th, thank you.
With regard to the consent agenda, can we move item 3 to action items for discussion?
Number 3, the
Number 3.
highway mechanic.
Could do that if you want.
I appreciate
Okay, we move the consent agenda number 3 to would be number 5 on the action item, correct?
Okay,
With that, I'll approve the agenda.
Second.
Second to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Somebody want to make a motion to approve our board meeting from October 11th?
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Work group session, October 18th.
Move to accept.
I'll second. I got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This time, I guess we'll do public comment.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
I'm at a little disadvantage because I know you're talking about the reuse study after this, and I'm not sure if you're making a decision today on it, but I'm just here on behalf of the Historical Society to,
You want to state your name just so,
Okay.
just for the record.
all right, Deb Ray,
Yep.
and I volunteer at the Houston County Historical Society. And I know some of the information I've gathered from the Argus articles or whatever that you're considering to keep, to study the 4 buildings. But then I read that maybe we'll not include the historic jail, and I'm here to advocate for keeping the historic jail in the study. It's the county building that's standing there ready for anything. This study that was done previously, it was decided to use some pit for county offices, but nothing's, been done. So this seems like a logical next step, and maybe, to find out what you need for county offices. So that I think this study to include all of the buildings is a good step to come to that conclusion. The building itself is probably the most structurally sound building of all of them standing there. So it's something that to consider as far as future use. I know there's insurance money from the jail when it was damaged, so you can use some of that money that, use the historic jail money for the historic jail and bring it back to use and be good stewards of our county properties.
So are you advocating for to use the historic jail for office space? Are you advocating for that? Or would you be interested in any kind of usage for it?
Well, I think part of the study would include, I advocate for county use, whatever you find out that the county needs. You know, if, I know before they've talked about, you know, we need a building on the highway and, you know, if you're looking at a building that can last, I think this one would last a lot longer than that one. But yeah, I think it should be included as part of the study and whatever you come up with.
And you're aware that we did a study?
Yeah, and that's the one that I participated in that, and the result was to come up, you know, with some county use
Okay.
offices in that.
Yep.
So this next study that you're gonna use all the buildings in as a study would be a good next step, I feel. So in all of them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.
Morning, I'm Ron Wilkie. My wife Karen and I live at 110 Shore Acres Road in La Crescent. And I'd like to make a couple of comments today related to the no wake zone application for our stretch of the West Channel. First, I'd like to thank all of you for everything that you've done to this point to support that application to establish the no wake zone. And I'd especially like to thank the county staff. We did all the work to prepare that application for submission. It was very impressive. So thank you all for that. I can't speak for all of my neighbors on Shore Acres, but we have had multiple conversations since the denial on the part of the DNR came down. And clearly we're all disappointed and struggling to understand the DNR's rationale behind this. Now, this is just me speaking now, but I think that decision lacked the courage to do the right thing. And all of us, as we've talked, have struggled to see how that case law that they cite in that ruling equates with the concern that was expressed for public safety in that application. Especially with the fact they're citing the difficulty to enforce, and in this case with that case law, enforce fishing regulations. It just doesn't seem like an apples to apples comparison. We're talking about public safety. I really struggle to even bring this up, but there was a life lost on the West Channel this summer in a jet ski accident. Granted, it was south of the section that we're talking about here, but as I was thinking about this, you know, with the enforceability, when that 911 call came in, or when the next accident occurs and that 911 call comes in, I really hope, and I don't think the dispatcher would stop and ask, well, wait a minute, which side of the border did that accident occur? It's just simply not apples to apples. And I really, really want to encourage you guys, strongly encourage you to support the challenge that you have, that you're taking under consideration on this morning's agenda. I recognize that's going to cost some money, but I believe those dollars invested, I mean, it's a very worthwhile investment of taxpayer dollars, given the concern for the safety of all who use that section of the river. So again, thank you for everything you've done with this. I'll certainly respect and honor anything you decide today, but really would encourage you to follow this through and with that challenge.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you did.
So Ron, you keep track of what's going on down on the West Channel. On the West Channel as it leads down to the East Channel, but I guess I consider the Wisconsin side, those are no wake buoys that are down there
Yeah,
along those condos that are along
Right.
there in the ramps. So that comes up and it just ends at like at the bridge.
Just
Yes.
off the bridge.
Just
Yes.
south of the bridge, so
Yeah.
they have a no wake zone on their side of the West Channel, but we're not allowed to have it on the West Channel that goes along Shore Acres.
Correct.
And is that a no wake zone that they enforce?
You know, I've never seen
I mean, like
anybody
when there's
pulled
a
over,
fishing-
but I see La Crosse County Sheriff's boats going through there.
Sure, but when they have a fishing tournament or whatnot, do the boats go like crazy up through there? Or do they go slow till they get to us?
Well, there's another small channel just west of where that, it splits. There's
Where it's
another little
split.
island in there.
They go.
And they go ripping through the right side there.
The west side.
Now, right. Now, I would have to say, again, I can't quantify this, but I would say most of the other boat traffic will avoid where, that stretch on the west side, because it does get real shallow there.
Yep.
And most people will go through and observe that no wake, so,
Until they get to the bridge, or
correct,
short of the bridge. Take
right, yep. Thank you, everybody.
Any more public comment? Guess we'll move on to appointments. It's 9:10. We got 5 minutes before.
Looks like Craig's
I think
on.
they are.
This is your order. There he is.
Joanna and Craig, are you on?
They're both on there.
Good morning. Yes, we're here.
Yep, we're here. You can start anytime you're ready.
So. We were talking at the last meeting about taking the old jail off and putting the new jail on and getting an estimate on what it would cost us. Just talk to you about that?
Yes. Yeah, she said that you had some questions about our proposal to include the Justice Center in our study, and maybe I think that was our main reason today, is to answer any questions you might have about how the study works and how we include any of the buildings that you want us to look at. And maybe more importantly, it's more of the services. How do we include more of the services that we should investigate in reorganizing in this youth study? Does that make sense? Is that what you're kind of looking for?
Yep.
Well, the original request was to have a study done on our current office space we currently use, and the Justice Center is what we currently use. And somehow that got omitted. But we understand now that if we wanted to add that costs us another $13,000 to include that.
Right.
But in the original RFP, it was requested to have 3 buildings. So it doesn't go by building, it goes by offices on your quote or your estimate, or?
Yeah. Joanna, do you want to explain your process and
Sure,
how all that works and how we determine what our fee would be?
certainly. So part of our beginning process when we're doing our data collection and the interview process with all the departments is individual meetings with each department head and collecting that data of what their space needs are, what their future, not only existing now, but what their future is. And so when we're adding in the Justice Center, I think we're adding in 4 new departments that we'd be meeting with. And then also in addition, if we're supposed to meet with the jail facility themselves. So the 4 departments do include the sheriff's office and deputies, and then the courts and court administration. There's one other one I'm missing there. Sorry.
Corrections.
So that corrections. Yes. Thank you. So that is where that additional time and the fee came into play. And I guess we can understand that to be included in our initial fee. And I have a quick colored example of the county departments if you want me to show that, but just really explaining that we went from a certain number, adding that on. Now, the additional building does add a little bit of time also, because as we're getting into block planning, and for planning for those future needs, and giving you guys the different options that you can look at. The Justice Center is a lot bigger than the other buildings. And so therefore that adds a little bit of time, but it's really more, to me, it's more, and my time is really more about the different departments that we're meeting with.
The people than it is about the buildings.
Mhm.
So basically, then your original bid of, was it 49,000?
Yes.
Was basically just for two buildings then.
It was basically to understand the departments and the services that you provide in the in your main courthouse and your community services building out on the highway, and then trying to reorganize them for efficiency and using them in the three buildings that you had, which would have been the courthouse, community services building, and the historic jail.
So in other words, it was already, you're under your assumption that what the board wanted to do was to
Why would we
move from the community services building out on 44 into the historic jail. I mean, that was part of your bid process.
That was part of our understanding. I think that might have been in the RFP as well.
Why was it?
But where they move is less important than how your departments work and how they function and how the public comes and functions with your staff.
I agree with that. Yep.
But how did the old jail get thrown in on this? That's not a building that we are using.
Honestly, that's the easiest one for us because we already have drawings of that historic jail. If you don't want to use it, that's, you know, if you don't want to use that building, it's up to you, and we can fit the services into your other three buildings, the Justice Center. I think our biggest concern was that we've added these 4 departments that Joanna mentioned that we need to spend more time with and you know, understanding how they work and their needs and how much growth they have, and then trying to find a space for them as well.
That's been my concern all along, is that was what my assumption was when we did a consensus on doing a space utilization study, that we were going to do a study on their current office space we use and see if there was some efficiencies by combining, moving people around, opening up some walls and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So when the historic jail got thrown into it, I thought, well, we already, you know, you guys did a lot of work already on this historic jail. I've got it here. It's a thick of all the uses that it could be used for.
Right.
So what I'm understanding you telling me is that this is not, there wasn't really a lot of work to do for the historic jail part of it. It was mainly just for the 2 other buildings to interview those people and study those spaces. So if the RFP would have included the new Justice Center in the beginning, the bid would have been higher. Is that what I hear?
Yep, that's correct.
So I was wondering if, now that we're changing this, if we should resubmit this RFP and do another bid, because maybe there would be some other, I mean, these other companies were looking into it, and they saw that we're including the historic jail, and they realized that Collaborative Design had already done a feasibility study on that they didn't want to even be involved with it.
I guess one of the questions I had when we were discussing this last week, couple meetings ago, that can you give us a price, what it would be for the Myers Building, the courthouse, Justice Center? We already know what the Myers Building courthouse and old courthouse plus 13,000 would do to include the Justice Center. If we remove the old jail and utilize the new jail, do you have a figure for us to mull over today?
I don't off the top of my head. Honestly, I don't think it's going to be much different because where we put the people is, like I said, where we put the people is less time consuming than it is to determine how much space they need and their efficiencies and adjacencies. So if we're still drawing only 3 buildings, so in the end, if we're still drawing 3 buildings, it's still the same. Our added fee was really more about interviewing those departments and trying to work them into the space utilization plan than it was to draw that 4th building.
See, that's what should have been done originally is the
So in the original bid, you were not including the attorney's office, sheriff, the jail, et cetera, was
That's
not
correct.
included.
Mhm.
That's
So
correct.
that's why we're adding it because it's excess time and effort with the other departments.
Right.
So actually, you're not, you already did quite a bit of work on the old jail, but it should be included because we own it. It's part of our property. And it could be possibly part of the study. But we're only adding the extra Justice Center because of the other 4 departments that we're dealing with and interviewing them and their needs, correct?
That's correct.
And evaluating that building, if there's other future possibilities or uses, that might be opportunities there too. And as we walk through, go ahead.
So there is some cost on your end there to reevaluate the historic jail? Was in that 49,000?
Well, not to evaluate the building because we've already done that.
The cost for the jail, the historic jail would be in the actual block planning, space planning part that comes at the end of the study. And then developing all the different.
So by pulling that out,
Mhm.
that would save you some expense there, wouldn't it?
To not consider that at all in our options as we're coming to
Right.
our conclusions.
Right.
I mean, yes, in a way, I guess it would save some because we wouldn't be looking at that at all. It might be to your disadvantage though, not to consider that just as an option. So,
Now,
But yeah,
honestly, it's just off the top of my head, I'm thinking that by the time we get to adding those block plans to the historic jail drawings, since we already have the drawings complete for that building, it might be 8 hours of work for one of our technicians or architects, which maybe, that's probably going to amount to, in rough terms, about $1,000, let's say.
So could you give us a new quote for the new Justice Center, the courthouse, the Meyer Building, and we'll leave the jail as an option?
We could do that.
I think that's what I asked earlier.
mhm.
And the same thing with you asked. Everybody okay with doing that?
I think we need to include all 4 in the study.
Yeah, but we got it already studied, we just have it there as an option, so if we need it, we'll use it. We don't need it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. So what I'm hearing is that you were all assuming that all 4 buildings were included in the original RFP and the responses. And so now you're surprised by the additional amount that has been requested for interviewing the Justice Center departments. That's kind of our main issue here that we're talking about, correct? It was assumed it was originally included. Okay.
We were assuming that it was going to be a space utilization study on our current office space we currently use in all 3 buildings.
Mhm. Okay.
And we don't currently use the historic jail for any office space.
But we could in the study.
If we got
I know.
it studied here, it'd be,
But
that
is
was
there
back
any
in
space-
2018, it was going to be 3.7 million, and that was a conservative figure. You know, and this all boils down, I'm not saying there's other uses we could use the old historic jail. I'm not saying we should do anything to it. I'm just saying we need to, this was understanding from some of the department heads, the IT, that it was going to be on the current use we use. And by combining, taking out some walls, combining space, not another new project to rebuild a current building.
Well, the Historical Society needs space, so we could always
Yep,
fix it up for space for the historic.
for storage or for a museum or whatever, you know, but
We just need to have numbers.
Yep.
Like to have where, like I said earlier, with the Meyer Building, the courthouse and the Justice Center, we already know what your bid was for the Meyer courthouse and old jail, plus the additional 13 for the Justice Center. So there, I'm sure there's some differences there, and as was mentioned here, it might not be that much more if we only do the 3 buildings. But I was hearing earlier from Johanna that we're gonna have to interview 4 department heads and so on. So I just like to have some numbers to see where we're gonna be at. I want to get it done. I don't want to belabor it any longer. I would hope that perhaps between now and next Tuesday, you can come back with some numbers for us to mull over and be prepared to make a final decision and get this thing rolling. It's been talked about for quite a while, and I'd like to get her done.
well, it would have been ideal to have it included in the original RFP. For some reason, that got omitted, that the Justice Center that we currently use, that we spent a lot of money on, and it wasn't included. It doesn't make any sense to me why that was not included.
Well, you can come back to us next week with some figures. We'd
Sure.
appreciate it.
We'll submit, a new cost for the 3 buildings that you mentioned, and we'll keep the historic jail as an alternate, as a separate number. If you want to include that, you can. If you don't want to include it, you can not take it.
Sounds good with everybody?
The only thing I want to mention, from my perspective, is I've seen the study from a number of years ago, that 3.7 million, which was for the entire facility, the old jail. The basement, first floor, second floor, third floor, the cell block. From my perspective, we don't need to do the attic. We don't need to do the basement. If we had the first and second floor and didn't have to do the cell block. Granted, it's all part of the building, but how much space would we actually need? Because the 3.7 million then, which would be more now, was for the entire building. But if we only need office space on those first 2 floors with a smaller elevator and whatnot, that would change the cost, but still provide the space that we need to be functional.
Yep.
The old jail also presents a problem as far as parking, because it's on the opposite end of the campus, and is our parking lot's big enough to handle bringing everything from the highway to that campus. But that's where your study comes into place. But my perspective is that we don't need to do the entire building. If we can get by without the basement, and the attic, it'll save quite a bit of money. So if we could get that alternate like you talked about and see where we stand,
All right.
Okay.
We'll get that to you.
Very good.
Construction of the jail on the second floor was $486,000 cost back then.
All I'm saying is that
So it would save you 400, that's just 2018 figures, of course, which is gonna be considerably different.
Right.
So,
But-
and by also, you have to remember that by selling that building out by the highway, you don't have parking out there enough for the city ordinance. So that, what's that gonna do to the value of selling that property?
depends on who buy, what their needs are.
Yep.
But it's just my perspective on the old jail.
Because we have to lease parking space from down below
Yep.
in order to qualify to have that as an office building.
That's right. $1,500 a year for 10 years.
Okay, all right,
All
thank
right.
you. And
All right.
we'll talk next week.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Consent agenda. We've got number 3 taken out. And we're adding the resignation of William Pearsons. Correct?
Yep.
Yes. Anybody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second,
I'll second it.
for the motion and a second, any more discussion? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda carried. Action. Consider renewing Paul Fricke's term on the Crooked Creek Watershed Board. His term is up for renewal on November 30th, 2022.
Move to approve. Paul does a good job.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve Paul Fricke renewing his term. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion. Consider approving submission grant applications along the Spring Grove School District and HVMHC to evaluate disparities in access to children's mental health. The primary purpose of this grant will be to complete the health equity data analysis. Got it.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
So this is a grant opportunity we have from the Minnesota Department of Health. It's a quick turnaround. We received the RFP not too long ago, and it's due by the 28th. What we are proposing to use this grant for is what's called a health equity data analysis, or a HEDA, and work in conjunction with one of our partners, the Spring Grove School District and the Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center, in looking at access to children's mental health services. It's a 6-month time frame. There isn't a county match, and the main thing we're purchasing is that data analysis that can then inform future projects to try and address some of those barriers or barriers to access for children's mental health. Our hope would be also that we combine it with some work we're doing with Olmsted County around looking at access to children's mental health, and some data work that they're doing. So that's kind of the gist of it. You guys have anything you want to add?
That we already have like a continuation plan. So it connects with some of my ship work as well with adverse childhood experiences. So that will also kind of build a framework for where I'm going in the next year and a half.
Yeah, thank you, Bree, for mentioning that. So with our state health improvement program, dollars that are allocated to us, one of the strategies that we have is working with adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And so this data work will help inform that work that we are already committed to with the SHIP allocated dollars.
So this is just data collection work?
Correct. Yeah, we're not hiring people. We'll spend some of it on time, but it will be specifically for developing that health equity data analysis when that's done and the thing is done. So there isn't a tail.
So the grant application will, after you've done it, if it's approved, then they will reimburse you? Is that how the grant works?
I don't know
That's how
whether
SHIP,
it's
I think,
reimbursed. It's not like SHIP is a allocated funds.
Okay,
This is a competitive grant that we apply for.
and how much is it for? Do you know?
You know, that's a good question. How much?
The minimum amount is $20,000 and the maximum is $150,000. And right now we're proposing just $20,000 because it's going to utilize majority of time versus any other expenses.
Okay, so, okay, I understand that.
Because of the quick turnaround on this, some of the final details aren't in place. We've got commitment from the Spring Grove School District.
Mhm.
But we knew that we didn't have another opportunity to be in front of you guys before it's due on the 28th. So,
Right.
but the deliverables for the grant will be the equity report.
So you're
And
looking for approval to
to submit
apply
it,
for the grant,
correct.
basically. I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'm not done asking questions yet. Please. Well, you can make your motion and I can do the discussion afterwards.
Okay.
So with regard to this grant,
Yes,
it's in conjunction with you and the Spring Grove School, with us and the Spring Grove schools.
correct.
And the grant study is just going to see what the need is at Spring Grove.
We're going to use them because we'll use their student body and the school district. It's not going to go to the other school districts at this point.
So the grant is completed. What happens after the grant? Is that just, okay, we've done a study, or is that then going to become a needs for an increase in the budget in order to provide the services required?
I don't know that it necessarily is intended to be something that we'll bring to the county board and say we need to increase our budget, but it may inform work that we're doing, like the ACES work that Bree's going to be doing. We'll do it based on data, what our true needs are. And we may have another opportunity coming after this, that after we've done this with Spring Grove, we work with the other school districts and they'd like to do that too. So we get a data-driven approach to what our access issues are with children's mental health.
And the collection of this data is what the grant is for. Does the school provide a listing of children with needs, or how do you come up with the data?
We're going to be working on focus groups with like the parents, the teachers, some of like the daycare providers that work in conjunction with the school district in Spring Grove. And then we're going to do a parent survey where we mail out that survey for them to fill out and return. And then all of that data together, we're going to do the data analysis, or the HEDA, and that's going to provide us our gaps in mental health in that school district. And then that'll transition into my ACE work, where we're going to work with Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center to try and bridge the gap with the mental health support within that school district.
And does Hiawatha Valley Mental Health have a contract with Spring Grove School that they provide services within the school
They do.
already at this time?
They do.
So the net effect is going to be just a question of how much more need there is than what they're already being provided.
Yes.
This will assist Spring Grove in getting the services from Hiawatha Valley then, if they have numbers or information on the analysis.
Presumably, I mean, that would be our intention, is that, you know, we hear lots of anecdotal information that there's real problems with access to children's mental health services. And, you know, we hear a variety of things anecdotally. This will be a data thing that says, you know, here's where the gaps are, and give us a smarter approach to how we try to fill those in a collaborative environment. But it isn't, to be clear, it isn't an intent to say, okay, here's this need, and then that's going to translate into a dollar commitment from the county.
Unless the higher ups say that
The higher ups,
the state, or this is going to, where's this data analysis going to,
it's a tool that we'll use.
that you'll use?
Yeah.
it's not for the state.
No.
They're just giving you some money to do it.
Yeah.
They don't want to see the results.
They don't want to see the results. So
The point of the grant is around equity. And there are a variety of different equity issues in the state. This being one that we felt was apropos to our communities. And it isn't something that I see that it's intended to get this information then to lever local communities to do something that they're not committed to doing. I think it's a widely held assumption that there's problems or access to children's mental health services is a problem, but we don't have good data to support that. And so my intent with this, or our intent with this, is that it would provide a basis for us to come up with a strategy to try and address those, and also support some of the work that we're already committed to doing through SHIP. But it isn't something that the state gets and goes, oh, well, you've got these problems, so now you have to invest to fix them. I think across the state, they know that there's challenges with access to mental health services. We're just trying to have a more data-driven approach to what we can do locally to address that, and how we can leverage partnership to try and address that.
Being a competitive grant, how many grants are there?
How many people will apply?
Well, how many do they award until the dollars are spent?
Yeah, is the question how competitive?
More so, I mean, there's 87 counties, 800 and some school districts. Are they not?
The health equity group that the state is newer, and so this is the first time they put out this proposal, so
Yeah.
it's,
So we
we're
don't
jumping
know.
on it first.
Go ahead, Eric.
So it's one grant for, it's one grant for each region during each funding cycle. And there's right now proposed 2 funding cycles. So we have the 6-month one from in December until May 31st of 2023. And then there may be an additional one that comes around in January if they have enough applicants. But it is, Equity Network is brand new. We have our first meeting coming this week. And then this is their first grant from the Equity Network. So it's very, very brand new. And they're just trying to get equity on the table as a whole.
There will likely be equity projects in other parts of the state that address more racially diverse communities, a variety of different things that will likely get studied and addressed through this funding. We felt that to compete for this, we wanted to look at access to children's mental health services.
Any more questions?
You look like you have a question, Commissioner.
Well, I would like to make a motion to approve applying for this grant.
Okay.
So it's equity. So we're not asking about, we are asking, what are the gaps that are doing, that we have in addressing children's mental health?
Correct.
No matter what background, what anything, right?
Equity is a broad topic. The way we're looking at it is there equitable access to children's mental health services?
So is that based on income?
We don't know yet. We can
So
make
that's what it's gonna be, this study is whether
is
it's
trying to
for-
look at where we've got gaps. Is it because of people's, where they are geographically? Is it transportation? Is it socioeconomic? What is it? Is it the available services to bring to provide those services? We've got a lot of anecdotal ideas as to what that is.
Okay.
But the question is there equitable access to children's mental health services? And I think that the assumption is there isn't equitable access to children's mental health services, but we don't have data that says, we did this, we looked at these factors, and this is what, where our gaps are and where we should direct our efforts. So I think that's the HEDA, or the health equity data analysis, is one of a number of things that you could do with this grant. So that's what we felt that we could do that met needs here in Houston County, and that we could be competitive in this grant round.
Well, to me, children's mental health, it doesn't matter. I mean, they're children, they all need help, that have the issues, so I guess why not make it accessible to everyone, that instead of based on equity, that just makes it confusing.
I think you're saying the same thing we're saying, is that, and I don't know that anybody is sitting somewhere saying, let's give a little more access to these people and a little less here. But systems evolve over time. And, some of it has to do with, population centers and access to those kinds of things. Children's mental health services tend to have more of those in larger population areas.
Right.
So what does that mean for rural areas? And how can we bridge some of those gaps? I don't think there's anybody sitting here saying, well, somebody in Houston County, we don't care about them, or their need for mental health services is less than somebody in a different county. It's just over time, these systems have evolved. We make assumptions about it. This is an attempt to take a data approach to say, here's what it looks like. And that will help inform what we try to do going forward to try and address that, because I couldn't agree with you more. If there are children who have needs, it shouldn't matter where they are. We should do what we can to support and help them.
Right.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So we assume that you'll be back with a report on what you.
Well, first we'd have to come with, if they approve our grant application, then you guys have to say, sure, we'll take your money.
Yep.
And then we'll come back and definitely tell you what we learned with this.
Okay.
Good. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Consider whether or not to have our ASLAW file all that, saying the challenge of being our decision. Nope, that this one has to be done by October 28th.
Morning.
Good morning.
So
You in a hurry, Sam?
He's part of this.
So as you guys are aware, we submitted an application to the DNR in May for the no-wake zone along West Channel. And we received word in September that that had been denied, seemingly on the basis that they didn't feel we had jurisdiction to put this ordinance in place on the Wisconsin side of the river. I know in discussions with Bob, it doesn't seem that they recognize that La Crosse County does have an ordinance in place on a different part of West Channel. And so that is one kind of inconsistent item that we have identified in that letter. But anyway, moving forward, if you guys wanted to appeal this decision, in my initial discussions with council, it sounded like that was the route we take for that did not have a timeline on it. But they have kind of reconsidered and they don't want us to go that route and then be told that we should have gone back and gone to the Court of Appeals, which does have that deadline. So they want to start in the Court of Appeals. And so our 60-day deadline would be the 28th of October here. And so I guess
So who's advising you on
this would be coming from Squires. Who's counsel for generally represents the county.
Through MCIT, is that correct? No?
No.
Through the county.
Oh, okay.
Insurance. His recommendation or his notification was that it's what, $25,000 to $50,000
Yeah.
cost.
His original recommendation was that he didn't think there was much hope for that, was there?
Yeah. I think it was kind of a toss up.
It's a 50-50 chance. And so one of the articles I was reading from the emails and the discussion, if it went through district court and then got appealed to Court of Appeals are a lot more costly. I believe that if by going directly to the Court of Appeals, we can keep the costs down and still hopefully come up with something. And just for information, we're trying to make contact with La Crosse Harbor Commission to get them on board with us to expedite this thing. I know the discussion has been downriver from the bridge is a no-wake zone that they utilize. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want to call it, La Crosse City County has jurisdiction on both sides of that piece of water. The line is somewhere on that island and all that kind of stuff. So the deal is that if we can get the commission, La Crosse Harbor Commission on board, go forward and go to the Court of Appeals, my feeling is we could get this over the word. I don't know if Mr. Yant has any feeling or thought or.
I don't take a position on it. I guess my thought would be just to, I wouldn't take a position on it. But what I would say is just how this would work, just from a framework would be, it's what we always had an issue with. This is just an odd set of circumstances here. And it's not clear with the DNR's order. We back up. It's not clear with the DNR's decision what that is. Is it an order? It's a decision. And so depending on what it is, you may get into district court and they'll say, well, no, you should have taken it to the Court of Appeals who are rid of certiorari. And in this way, you're kind of protecting both flanks on this, is that you're appealing it, you're going that route, so somebody can't say, hey, you should have went this other route. And as initially it was thought, well, you need to go through and get a declaratory judgment because that really wasn't an order there. What is that? And so you go to a declaratory judgment when you have something you don't know what it is and you're looking for a court order. Because then when you have a decision and you have a court order, then that's the vehicle that goes up to appeal something. And not speaking for Attorney Squires, but I believe that's what's going on here, is that he's not sure exactly what this is. But if we appeal it, we start that process, at least we have filed a notice of appeal, and whether we go through with the appeal or if we decide to settle it before the appeal gets taken care of, that's a possibility. But if you don't appeal and you should have, then you're done. And so, and as Commissioner Severson was indicating, much like in any type of this dispute, is that there may be settlement options. And I've counseled the zoning department that to keep exploring, like with the Harbor Commission, are there things that we can do within our jurisdiction, being that inside the state line? Are there things that we can do inside the state line? And so to keep exploring all those other options, while if the board would decide to appeal this matter, to keep all those other options open. So maybe there is a way so we don't have to appeal. We can meet sort of halfway or in the middle, literally or figuratively on this. The other issue, I guess, would be is that as far as the declaratory judgment, that could be looked at as well, but that you have a little bit more flexibility on timelines. And finally, as far as Attorney Squire is doing it, because it's a regulatory agency, you're going to be dealing with the Attorney General's office. And I think he deals with those issues all the time with the Attorney General's office. I think he's best to handle it. My office doesn't have the horsepower right now to do it because we're down one attorney. And we can still operate how we do our day-to-day functions, but not to take on an additional task like this. And so I would suggest if you're going to appeal it, you need, whether it's not Attorney Squires or someone else. I know as far as Attorney Squires, he's familiar with our county, familiar with my office and staff. And while he wouldn't be through our insurer, he does know us through the insurer. And that's what I can add.
I just want to note that in the reading of this decision, I don't see any place where La Crosse County or city objected to us in this, there was the DNR who felt that we didn't have jurisdiction beyond the line or something. Or what.
Well, and that goes into the issues. There seem to be a lot of looking at fishing regulations as opposed to what we're doing. The second thing is it goes back to that difficult position the DNR put us into, is that they wouldn't give us an opinion ahead of time. And if they had said this ahead of time, then we could have said, okay, but do you know about this? Do you know about that? But they didn't tell us that. And they wouldn't look at it and give us an opinion until after we forwarded our application. And so it kind of put us into the spot that we're at this point.
So with regard to the appeal, we have to make the appeal by the 28th.
Correct.
You don't have,
That, if we want to.
the deadline.
If that's the deadline.
You
want
want
to
to
continue,
By the 28th, we have to make the appeal or it's done.
Yep.
Making the appeal does not mean that we're going into the court system right away.
All it means is you preserved your right to appeal.
And that doesn't cost us a whole lot to preserve our right.
And I don't know what it would be, but you know, there's certainly, I suppose, a filing fee.
You gotta file a writ. This
And
is
you-
what we're basically, the action
Yeah.
item is to
Right.
whether to hire Spires to
Right.
file a writ for the appeal.
But the 25 to 50,000 that we had notice of isn't what it's gonna cost to just file the writ.
We don't,
Correct, that would be for the, potentially the whole process, what
Right,
an estimate.
Correct.
And that was, you know,
Filing a writ to preserve our right would be a relatively inexpensive means to give us time to see what the Harbor Commission, the City of La Crosse, whoever has to say about it.
Maybe what you'd want to do is authorize the writ to be filed, and then you could have a subsequent meeting with Attorney Squires, would be the board's counsel for that issue, and then talk about the next steps and that type of thing.
so we're gonna put a cap on that then for the writ, or, I mean,
I have no idea what a writ filing would cost.
I would suggest maybe a cap of, initially a cap of, I'd say worst case, $5,000.
to file the writ for the,
Just to
Yes.
file the writ
Yes.
and schedule a meeting with Attorney Squires.
Get the process started, basically.
I think so too.
And you wouldn't have to have him come down, obviously. You could have it via Zoom.
but once he files that writ and goes to the Court of Appeals, we're basically hired.
Well, I mean, that's what you do. You
I mean,
hire him for that task.
Then we have to keep going.
No, you don't. You can
No,
always,
no.
No,
you can always discharge your attorney at any time.
Right.
What's your guess on the timeline between the writ and when this would come up?
Well, you'll have time. You have to file the writ. That's the biggest thing, is to preserve your right to appeal. If you don't, you've lost your ability to appeal. All you're doing by filing the writ is preserving your right to appeal.
We need to do that.
I mean,
Anything else, Amelia, or need a
I have been in contact with the Harbor Commission and they have a meeting in November. And they asked me, what would you like to talk about? And I said, well, the people around Shore Acres have certainly been impacted by this and we'd like to discuss that. I didn't get into any specifics. I left it just like that. So I'll hear back from them.
Do we have a date for that yet?
Not yet.
November?
I was
Keep me posted.
just
absolutely
November something.
so far.
I move to file the writ of whatever that thing is, authorize Raslaw to just to start the process with a cap of $5,000 on the initial writ.
I will second it.
We've had a motion and a second. Consider going the first step of this.
Reserve our right to appeal.
We reserve our right to appeal. So we had, any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank
Thanks.
That's enough for you.
Right.
Yes, you're up, Brian. Consider Consider approving an integrity agreement between Houston County and Mount Berry Townships for snow plowing.
So we have an existing agreement in place with Mount Prairie Township to plow Jumper Road and Evans Hill Road along with maintain the majority of their signage. What this agreement is essentially it's like an amendment to the previous agreement, adding in to have the county plow South Ridge Road as we see fit and are able to this next winter. They're throughout the term of this agreement. So that's all it is. Everything else stayed identical to the previous agreement, just adding in South Ridge.
It's just updating agreements more or less. We had it in the past, correct?
Yes,
It's to the Winona County line.
yes.
So did your crew think they could handle that extra?
Yeah. One of the things we have is, we have a new plow operator on this route. So whenever you get a new operator, there's, that learning curve on, how quick are they gonna plow? What do we need to cover and stuff? Looking at that route length, the route was actually slightly shorter than some of the other routes. So we think that we can handle the extra 3 miles. Now, ultimately, if we get into the winter and we determine that we can't, don't have the staff to keep doing it, we do have the option to kind of back out on this. So it has the terms in there that exact
30-day
where it is,
termination.
but, well, we have the 30-day termination on all of it. But ultimately that within the snow removal exhibit, a snow removal service schedule will be determined by road conditions and Houston County staff availability. So, if we don't have time because of our staffing levels, we ultimately can tell the township, you're responsible to.
How long was this agreement for? Duration?
Through May 1st of 2030.
2030?
Yeah, so it's, we don't usually have a whole lot of changes to what roadways we plow for the townships. We do have a 30-day out, so we can get out of it. The township can get out of it at any time. We just don't want to have to come back to the board every year or two and update it if there's no changes.
And you currently have some roads in the Crescent Township too that you do? Is my
Yep.
understanding still?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a nice road now to plow. Being blacktop there.
So long as we don't do any damage to it. So they got that road all done now and everything's done with that thing?
Yep, so the project's not finalized out yet. The final for the gravel portion will come to the board next week. The paving portion will come to the board to be closed out in about a month and a half, we may guess. But the construction is all done. There's one mailbox that might need to go out there and put in one more mailbox support. But otherwise it is done. It's paved. The shoulders are now been completed. Totally done with the construction.
Was there plans to put another lift on that? Or no, this is it.
Yeah. Yeah, ideally they wanted to have a 2-course pavement.
Right.
It would have rode a lot better, but the money wasn't available to do that. So,
But it is recommended that they seal coat it, though, right?
yes. Yep.
So when you have these agreements, you've got the county roads to do, you've got the agreed upon township roads, does the person responsible for that area drive these roads and make up? Or somebody makes up what's the most efficient way to do it? I mean, do they plow 25, cut down here, come back and then go down the hill?
Yep, that's my, our operator, maintenance supervisor, myself, all gonna decide how we wanna, plow the route and adjust the route. So we look at that every year on what changes we wanna make and.
Prioritize the county roads and then go back into the township.
Usually not always. Sometimes the township roads just make sense to do that as you're in that area rather than do the county completely. But yeah, usually we try to prioritize the higher volume roads first, which are generally the county roads. Yeah.
Okay, this is your recommendation.
Yes.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Well, I just wanted to Well, there's a short section of Houston Township,
Very end.
but there was always a road swap agreement. I think it was verbal. between Mount Prairie and Houston on that. but Mount Prairie is flipping the bill for the whole thing, right?
Yes, we will bill Mount Prairie. We don't plan on splitting out. Not sure what it is, couple hundred feet.
Yeah, it's not very much. It's only like footage right offhand, 220 feet or something. Right at the Winona County line.
Is that where Marshall has land?
And we could talk to Mount Prairie Township and
Well, just
and Houston Township as well.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, we're not gonna lift the plow up and leave 20. or
Well, no,
200 feet of
no, but I
roadway,
mean,
but make
it
sure
should
that
be
it's,
agreed upon. I mean, as long as Mount Prairie's paid for it, that's, Houston is gonna care.
I will definitely, yeah, get in touch with both.
I make a motion, we approve the agreement for Mount Prairie to plow that road.
With Mount Prairie.
Yep.
For the county.
With all their, yep,
Second.
amended agreement.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. No discussion. Vote say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we're gonna go back to item number 3 on the consent agenda. It's the hiring Steve St. John as a probationary highway mechanic at a 1.0 FT 24 step 5 effective November 14th, 22. Conditions of self-completion of a background check.
Reason I brought this to the action item rather than consent. Why is this a step 5?
Because of the breadth and breadth of experience and the number of years of experience that this individual brings to the table is, off the top of my head, it was over 20 years of current heavy equipment repair experience.
Yep, so the experience he has, used to work for, doing repairs with Caterpillar. I believe he jumped over to do some stuff at Titan Machinery, did a bunch of ag equipment side of things. He had his experience with literally cutting apart frames on vehicles, extending them to make them longer, to put bigger boxes on generally ag equipment and stuff. So he has the knowledge to cut apart and custom fabricate frames, and then the experience on the equipment side, it's extensive, and we think he can come in. He's done a lot of stuff's been done in the field with a service truck in the field versus in the shop. He's done some shop stuff. We think he can come in on day one and function like he's been there for 20 years. He should be able to do equipment. The reason why he's really seeking out the county and our side of the business, he likes the variety with the older equipment along with the newer stuff, gets away with some of the programming that he's done with working inside of the Caterpillar or some of the other repair shops where you diagnose what the problem is, you put it back together, then you deal with all the programming and computer side of things. He'd rather get his hands dirty and do what we have. So it really does come down to that vast variety of experience. And step 5, that is still slightly below the majority of our staff on the maintenance side. So he's not coming in higher than our other maintenance staff. Most of them are at step 6, I believe, or going into step 7.
And I believe it was 4 Cat Ziegler shops he'd worked for, 3 or 4.
Yeah, I can't remember his exact number.
He had,
Different jobs, or how many jobs did he have?
well, his family comes from, he comes, holiday spouse who was active duty military, who's now retired. So he regularly went to work for various Cat Ziegler shops. wherever they were stationed.
Depending on, disposal.
Pardon me?
Depending on disposal deployment.
Yeah, so yes, Sarah, we asked that question, in fact, because there were several different shops. And although strong references from those employers.
So was this negotiated start?
Yeah, we offered a lower.
We offered 4. With the, and Brian and I talked about this ahead of time with the understanding that, you know, let's see where it takes us. This is a market area we don't have. We're fortunate to get the 2 applicants we had to have some choice there.
The only reason I asked the question, I mean, this is 2 steps higher than our prior mechanic.
And that's what we hear all the time in negotiations, that we hire people at a higher step than the people that left.
So when we look at negotiating or working with someone on a proposal, and there's many times we say, no, this is it, this is where we're going. We look to both internal equity as well as the individual's experience, and balance their experience with where our current staff are, no matter the department. And make that decision that way. Otherwise, we would be hiring at entry level only those without much, if any at all, experience and our EEO processes. We look at what their experience is, how competitive they are, and as well as is it within our current.
The last 2
budget.
maintenance workers that we hired started as step 1, but they had previous experience as well.
I'd have to go back and look and see to that, and it's an individual's particular experience. It depends upon the nature and level of experience people come to us, especially with regards to in highway, we look to see, did they operate large plows?
Yeah, the previous 2 hires, neither one of them, plowed out of a tandem axle dump truck, the side wing. They didn't work at highway departments doing road work. They, while the one worked for a contractor doing some underground utility work, primarily, installing sewer and water lines, rather than doing what we do with a lot more of the road surface stuff. So there's been some differences that way. They didn't come in with, from another county or MnDOT or doing identical work to what we're doing with, we offer them that step 1, where, this person, and I would love to have my, previous, mechanic back. Nothing against the new mechanic. We think that he'll do a good job, and, not picking and choosing one over the other. When the previous mechanic was hired on, he didn't have anywhere near the experience that this person does.
Experience or lack thereof of experience can be a cost to us as we go through all these things. When people come in and are stumbling through something, it can be a costly thing. So here, and cutting frames and getting them back together is an art. You just don't go out and say, all right, let's cut it here and put a weld patch on it. Something has to be done and done correct. Gentleman has this experience. Dealing with big engines, that's what we got. That, and it's going, if it's electronic, it ain't the old baling wire and plier anymore. It's, you got to know what you're doing. The other thing is when an individual comes in applying for a job, they come in with a dollar amount. I need to have X number of dollars to come to work. And it sounds like they tried to adjust what he felt he was worth to what one of our steps are. And that's probably why we're at the 4 and 5 or, whatever, it's 5 here now. But those are some of the things that from my experience, a good mechanic is hard to come by. I have a friend of mine, his son just went to work at $40 an hour down in Iowa to work on John Deere tractors. He just got out of school. So, I mean, I don't know what the step five is as far as dollars and cents. I didn't get the chart out, but mechanics are hard to come by. The shops I go to, they're begging for people, so.
So when we look at mechanics and hiring mechanics, part of our evaluation process is their skill set, whether they're experienced, and as well as some of our operators, we look at skill set, we look at certifications. Are the certifications current? Is the experience current, or is the experience dated to where the skill set really isn't there? There may be years of experience, but they're not in the current skill set, not with current certifications.
Was the
I
other,
think-
was the other candidate qualified?
He met minimum qualifications, but there, you know, we had
Other one had a lot less experience and it was primarily dealing with just the ag side. It wasn't dealing a little bit, but very minimal experience on construction equipment. And step, just looking at step 5, it looks like it's at $26.57 an hour.
Cheap. Paid 39 in lacrosse.
Well,
Don't put that.
I'm not questioning this person's credentials at all. That's just, I'm just relaying what we hear from the union. That they don't like the fact that we hire people higher step than the previous one that left.
I could be mistaken, but I don't think that has been a challenge in the 49ers that we heard back.
And it does appear like this is actually at the identical step as what the person was when they left.
What's that?
I believe this is at the identical step to when that person left.
Here it says step 3, but maybe this is an old.
When they
Says
got
step 3 here.
converted, actually, yeah, so the conversion that I'm seeing in the union contract that was approved on January 22nd or 24th of 22 showed the mechanic at step 5 on January 1st. So at
Well,
his
that makes it
5-year
a little better
anniversary,
that
he actually would have
he
went
was
to
hired at the same rate.
same rate. Yep, and actually he would have, the previous mechanic would have jumped up to step 6 in July.
That was the only reason I asked to have it switched from consent to action, just so I understood how that process worked and what the status was. That being said, I'll make a motion to approve the hire.
Second.
Okay, we had a motion and a second to approve the hire of this new mechanic. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, now we'll go to board discussion items. We had a finance meeting this morning. Things look pretty good. We're gonna have some more meetings in the next 2 weeks to get nailed down the final budget, work on cutting stuff from here and there if we can. Don't know, you got anything else you want to add to that, Julie?
No, that's about it. We had this comment that Donna has found some pretty good investments, so she's actually investing at a time that she normally doesn't because of 4% interest at this time. And I think those are about the high, oh, then the first opioid settlement check has arrived, so that's not much, but it's something.
What was that, 18,000?
Yeah, right around 19 it was. Yes.
Is that a semi-annual?
It's actually 22,000 something for our first payment and it's an annual. It's our appropriate or our award was 600 and some thousand spread over 18 years.
Anticipating the first 3 payments would be a little more than that, but it's
That's
less.
what the check was.
Yeah. Okay.
And let's see, what else? Well, we gotta dress up Monday for our thing in the Crescent.
District meeting. Yep.
District meeting, it's 9 o'clock.
So when you say dress up,
It's Halloween.
I know it. Are we, do we want to be professional certain ties or can we be Halloween?
You can do whatever you like.
I thought Eric said he was going to go as a farmer.
You don't change.
It's Halloween, isn't it?
I got a pair of ribs for you.
I bet it's got his own. But, can we be a little,
You can dress whatever way you want.
Well, the other ones we've been to, they're not all suit and tie.
no, I know that, but I mean, I'm talking
No.
a little more Halloween,
Oh, really? No. Thanks.
but I can.
You can, sure, go ahead.
You can do it. And, I don't,
More fun.
so they have somebody to MC that?
Yes,
do that
they
themselves.
do it.
Oh, so
EMC
we
runs
don't
it.
have to do that.
No.
I think you do a welcome.
Okay.
And then you did see the list of what they're looking for as far as a report from each county. What you set your levy at, what you've done. The biggest thing is our highway department. Getting that done.
The levy and the highway department.
Levy in the highway
Usually, yeah.
department for us. It's the biggest tool. Could write you some notes, Greg, or something.
Yeah, why don't you kind of put something together for me? Well, you got 12 years of experience.
No, I've seen reports from each county and yeah, they're pretty,
Extensive sometimes.
some of them are pretty extensive with what all they got going on.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess that's about all I got, except for some upcoming finance meetings. We're supposed to have some personnel meetings, but they don't. I haven't heard anything on that. All right, and I guess you might as well talk, Teresa.
Okay, well, I had two meetings that I went to last week. One was a Southeast EMS meeting. We were told to budget 78,000 for seatbelt money for last year, and we actually received 38. So it's down considerably. So they really appreciate each county, the 11 counties, donating out of their appropriations, which they do. I did tell them we do need a letter requesting it, though, as a reminder, not really a bill, but
Do we donate already?
we appropriate in our December when we
Yeah,
do
but how
it.
much have we been given them?
I think we've been giving them 5,000.
Okay.
5,000. So that really, really helps a lot. One of our board members, not really a voting board member, was the administrator for the Preston Fire and Rescue Department. He took the job as city administrator for Preston. So actually Preston took over Lanesboro Fire and Rescue totally. You probably saw that anyway. Those were the two main things. I did really request a letter though, because as you know, I won't be here in January to remind you. And this is important to
You can come.
I can comment, do public comments, say,
Sure.
don't forget EMS, I need it. Then we did have a quick joint board, a workforce development board. I got the new schedule for next year. And I will give that to Donna to put with your, when you do your organizational meeting in January. So we have an idea on that. Nothing was really pressing with that. We're working with the legislator, we're doing the infrastructure agreements. They had a long discussion on the change in workplaces, working more with not just the people that are coming in to apply for help for schooling or training and stuff, but also working with businesses to help them realize that a lot of people want to be flexible in their job. They'll get the job done, but if they do it at 10 o'clock at night, it gets done, you know, rather than being in the office from 8 to 5. So they're trying to work with a lot of business people to help them see the new way we do business. It was kind of interesting because some counties think, your employees need to be there 8 to 5, or some counties say, well, they get the work done no matter what hours they're working. Maybe they have to be in 3 days a week and couldn't do 2 from home. There again, childcare comes into play, a big thing with childcare. So it was a lot of good discussion, no action. Okay.
There's a lot of circumstances. I mean, some jobs you have to be.
Right,
Yeah.
oh, definitely. I mean, yeah, if you're cleaning the place or something, you have to be there, But, businesses need to look at all aspects of what you do. And childcare was a major consideration. People can still get their work done. But anyway, something that they will be considering over the next year.
Sounds good. Okay, Bob. Well, I haven't had too much to report. I had a CJCC meeting last Tuesday after our regular meeting. A lot of discussion about various aspects of the courts and the new penalty requirements and then what the judge can and cannot do. But I brought up the sentence to serve and discussed that. And I gave each of you a 5-year study of what sentence to serve has done over the last 5 years. You can see the effect that it's had with regard to the numbers because of COVID and how that's affected. And it's also been affected by the penalties that the judge can enforce or what's come down from the state as far as what they do. So there's not as many prisoners. I mean, I looked at the jail numbers the other day, and those 14 prisoners in jail, 3 of them were Houston County's, the other 11 were Winona County. Next year, Winona County's new jail comes into online. If we only have 3 prisoners, 4 prisoners at a time, plus probationary people, plus maybe juveniles, and sentence to serve is optional. They have a choice. I mean, if you say we have a job for you to do, they don't necessarily have to do it if they don't want to. Somebody on probation might want to get out, do something, maybe not. So things have changed drastically as far as the way it works in the courts and whatnot. So we have to make a decision on whether we're going to reinstate it as far as the budget is concerned or not have sentence to serve. I told Craig that we would let him know in November whether or not we were going to reinstate sentence to serve, only from the perspective that the sentence to serve officer in Winona County is retiring on January 3rd, and he could slide into that position. So if we don't do sentence to serve, he's got a place that he can go instead of being Houston County. So we have to decide, one of these next meetings, what we're going to do about that.
It'll have to be an action item, right?
It would have to be an action item, correct.
Just a point of issue, it's currently not in any of the budgets.
It's not in the budget right now.
So we're not gonna save anything.
We better make it official, I mean, one way or the other.
Mhm.
Right. Either add it to the budget to $78,000 or opt not to have sentence to serve so he can make application.
So is if Craig would have to drag the one over there?
Sure.
Mhm.
That's where it would be. But they have a larger jail population that's can be seen by our jail and the way it's been.
Why? He's a good man.
He's a good man, does a lot of work. And you look at the listing that he gave us at the last meeting with all the different things over the 25 years that they've done.
It's a fairgrounds.
Well, I'm not sure he does all that work for the fairgrounds as sentence to serve or if he's got a separate contract with them.
He must have a separate contract.
I don't know.
Anyway, that's for future discussion.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just something that, for your information. Also had a Selco meeting for the committee on that night, just as far as how the organization is set up. The contract that they sent back with the agreement of the $6,000 per library for the next 3 years. That's been approved by them. Sam's looked at it and doesn't have a problem. I gotta have Tess give her blessing and then we can approve that contract. It's everything that we had said as far as that's concerned, but just, I think it's the verbiage of the contract to make sure everything is satisfactory. We had the first children meeting the other day with regard to daycare in Houston County and getting organized on organizations that we contact and getting survey information from business, from parents, from providers, so that we have a handle on what people are looking for, what the needs are, and move forward from there. And then we're gonna have an appreciation night for the providers, followed by a town hall meeting for people to come and give their input as far as childcare and the needs. And then we have to come up with an idea on how we're gonna promote or advance childcare in Houston County. That's all.
I didn't have any meetings and been busy in the field, but.
Congratulations.
Back to what Greg had a question about personnel meeting. We're talking about having one, we just see if we can get a date back. I'll just talk to Tess about that again today if I can catch her. I just want to make a comment on this space utilization study, and I want people to understand that I'm not for tearing the jail down or not using the jail. I'm just was focused on the fact that we need to keep it to the 3 buildings we currently use. And looking also at the fact that the cost of reusing the old historic jail. I mean, we just spent 6.7 million on a new highway building. We're fixing up our roof, which we need to do. We're fixing up the parking lot. We're gonna see a steady increase in the payroll in the next few years with our new wage grid. I just don't, and plus we're still paying off on the new Justice Center. So I really think we need to watch our pennies here when it comes to how much we want to spend on reusing the old jail for office space. It's going to be millions of dollars. And I think that we need to be aware of the fact that, you know, we spent a lot of money here the last few years, along with the ARPA money as well. Want to make that clarification.
I don't disagree. That study a few years ago was for the entire building, all the floors and whatnot. I know we could save some money by just doing the main building and only 2 floors. Still be million plus.
It'd be, yeah, and this is back in 2018 and those figures were conservative. So it would be millions of dollars.
I don't know.
You know, but they could come up with a space utilization study. We don't have to go along with any of it if we don't want to.
Then why do it? I mean, that's what I mean.
Well,
If we want to do it, let's have the decision and do it. You know, instead of trying to have a study tell us that we should do it. Let's just make the decision. We want to spend
The study has
millions of dollars.
professional- The study is professional and can do this, the discussion with the department heads and everybody knows and put together the more reasonable use of the space than us trying to decide.
And I think there is other reasonable use of the space, not office space, especially when we're working on a work from home policy also. What do we need another office building for then if we're gonna have work from home policy? So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
We just need to have information that, of like Commissioner Burns says, is that, you know, there are areas that they had in the previous study that were definitely wouldn't be usable and, you know, I need to take another look at the building to see what the condition is now, but it's.
Have you looked at it?
Not lately.
Have you seen it?
Not lately. Not within the last year, so. So anyway, I just want to have figures on what it's gonna cost to look at these things. I read over some of that study from back 5 years ago. I went to the numbers, to be honest, mostly there, but then some other areas where they talked about this and that. I think we ought to just, get the numbers, what it's gonna cost us to look at the different avenues and then make a decision from there. I'm not advocating using the building right now, but it is one of our assets. We should see what our assets are worth.
That's all I got.
Well, I had the department head meeting yesterday and
I missed it because I was in
Oh, you-
Toronto.
you were traveling. The main highlights I'm gonna talk about from John's department, the electronic management system is up to date and then being used. They're still, getting the quirks out, but it's just like anytime you change from one system to another, there's, so that's positive there. Looking at Brian, he said most of all the road projects are done. There are some minor things in ditches, but the roads are all open in the county, and County Road 12 culvert was delayed until next year. We just talked about the mechanic position. Moving on down to planning or zoning department, maps are complete. The information is going to be utilized end of the month. Coming 31st is when the deadline is for the surveys. And the Harbor Commission, that was mentioned in our earlier discussion, we've notified them that we want to talk to them. That point. And Donna, I said they had another training for the pole pad, and that's all done, preparing for a couple of weeks from today. So happy about that. Wildcat is closed for the season. Got a couple of questions that Brian is going to go take a look at. And the final thing was Rob in Veterans Affairs got the Bonanza coming up on 5th of November over in La Crosse. He said it's very positive. I have over 100 vendors signed up already. So let's get our veterans over there to see if we can give them some assistance. Last night, I was at City Council meeting in La Crescent, and the highlights of their meetings were there's a private development on the north end of town up on the ridge that the residents are not happy with the roads. And long story short, it turned out that if they want the city to do it, it's going to cost them several $100,000 because the developer wanted to have a private gated building or property, which never turned up. And they have sold all the properties, and the road is crap. And it was substandard in my opinion from the beginning, but that was before my bailiwick. The other thing they had some discussion on was the Parks and Committee. They got several parks they're working on, so that's another issue for the local. And out at Weezer Park, they are looking to put in a pavilion out there. A wild ass guess of over 600,000. So that was their discussion last night. I'm glad we were able to go forward with the appeals, and I appreciate the support. Thank you.
We should get together and have a Parks Committee meeting with regard to Wildcat and future management decisions.
Exactly. Thanks for bringing that up. That was one of my thoughts when we were listening yesterday. So let's try and do that in November. Yep. Okay.
Plan on doing cleaning them things out this fall or next spring? When you plan on doing that? This fall.
This spring before we.
That's all I have.
Okay, well, I just forgot about one thing. I asked Sam to come down here about the STS sentence, but it seems like we put it in there and got that all taken care of, so we don't need to talk about that anymore. So Sam left, so I don't think he's gonna come back. That's all right. So I guess now we can go to public comment.
I have
Two more things. Don't worry, I won't drag your meeting out anymore.
Come on forward.
I used to sit in a lot of this kind of meetings, so I get it. Yeah, so first of all, with the No Wake and the meeting with the Harbor Commission, I think you folks and everybody here has a real good handle on, you know, all of the dynamics with this, but if you need any additional perspective or information on it, don't hesitate to give me a call. I'd be happy to help out. The other thing, I'm going back a couple of years. I'm 2 years retired from being a school district superintendent and a school administrator. I was an elementary principal in La Crescent for 6 years, superintendent in La Crescent for 6. But then I have the perspective of working west of the metro, right on the edge of the metro area for 5 years as superintendent. Dewey's daughter is, I think she's still there, special ed teacher in that district. So there's a lot of different interpretations of when you bring up the term equity. But with that, when I was listening to this grant, I thought, this is a great thing. Because when I thought of equity, right away, I went to a lack of equitable distribution of state resources to counties and to school districts. I'm here to tell you, and please don't ask me to quantify it with hard data. But the access to resources in the Watertown Mayor School District that I worked in Carver, mostly in Carver County, there was a dramatic difference in terms of the quantity of resources available to school districts up there than we had, at least when I was superintendent in La Crescent. So hopefully that data collection will help to make that case somewhere along the line for counties to get more support from the big folks at the state.
When you say resources, state funded.
Right.
Not taxpayer resources per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah, well, yeah, wherever it comes from. It's all tax.
I understand, but there's the local levy and then there's the state fund.
But god dang it, Houston County needs to make sure we're getting our slice of that pie, I would say. So kudos to the folks that are pursuing those opportunities. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Martin, do you have something you want?
No, I just got something for Teresa.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise I was gonna forget.
Allison, you got anything?
One thing I was gonna bring up, I sent you guys an email. There's a meeting about a trail action plan. This is for the extension of the trail from La Crescent to Miller's Corner. It's at the La Crescent Community Building from 5:30 to 7:30 on November 3rd. I'm just curious who wants to go, and if we're gonna have a quorum, I can advertise that there could potentially be a quorum. Or do just two of you wanna go? I mean, Okay, so Dewey plans on going. And then I heard from Commissioner Burns that he's interested. He's kind of also maybe gonna sit in on some of the bike trail meetings. Do you want us to just fill you in after Teresa, or did you wanna go and then?
Go, I don't have to.
No, I don't think I'm gonna go.
Okay,
Bob will go vice Teresa.
okay, then we won't need to advertise the potential quorum. Just curious on that. That's the only thing.
You can just keep us posted.
Yep.
Well.
I'll be there
I
too,
just-
so
I gotta
it's
ask a question.
the county and La Crescent that are.
Eric, this is eventually going to deal with your district too. If you want to go to.
But this is for the Crescent to Miller's Corner.
It's on the Miller's Corner.
And you're on the Smart Trails Committee, so.
Yep.
I mean, for future from Houston, Hopey to Houston, yeah, I'd probably be interested. I had a constituent ask me about it again. Because the potential trail would be going right through his farmyard. And he's not against the bike trail, he just has some concerns, and I said, well, there's not gonna be any eminent domain. And he says, well, how's that work if they can't get through? Then I said, they have to find a different route, you know, whether that be along the river. And he says, well, then I lose control of my river bank too. Is that gonna be maintained? And I said, those are all concerns that need to be addressed when they, you know, in future meetings, agreements or whatever.
This is just preliminary getting going here.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff to be done yet.
Carol, you got anything? Well, then I guess we could maybe have a motion to adjourn.
So move. Second.
Okay, we had a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourn.